So I think 2 years after I have worked consecutively in the country, and I started making research, and I realized that actually you don't even need to have a PRO before you could apply for the passport, right? So because up till then, my initial thought was that I needed a PRO, like I would just go from the student status and then you work and then you get a PRO before the passport. So yeah, that was something I actually realized later on. Okay, just a bit of a little background about me. So basically, I moved into the country in 2018 for my master's program, and I think in 2022, when I started working full time, I started putting up the documents which I needed for this application. So initially, my plan was actually to apply for the permanent residence permit. That was the first thing I inquired about. So I was told I needed a couple of documents like the German language certificate of B1, B2, and I was also told that, of course, you need to have worked 2 years minimum in the country. So you basically would have contributed to the country's social security, whatever pensions came for at least 2 years before you could get the permanent residence permit. And also, you need a couple of other documents like the living in Germany certificate, which is also known as the citizenship test. So all those things. So basically, I started working on those documents and putting them all together, and I think 2 years after I have worked consecutively in the country, and I started making research, and I realized that actually you don't even need to have a PRO before you could apply for the passports, right? So because up till then, my initial thought was that I needed a PRO, like I would just go from the student status and then you work and then you get a PRO before the passport. So yeah, that was something I actually realized later on, and I started making moves for the passport as opposed to the PR, right? So I started reaching out to the office that was necessary for the processing, and then they told me all the documents I needed to submit. The ones which were missing, I had to put them together. I think if I could recall some of the main documents, I'm also going to attach them as a screenshot to this video. Includes my working contract, my last 6 months pay slip as at the time I was applying, my passport, my residence permit, the German B2 certificate which I had at the time, and also, things like my master's degree and so on. There was like lots of documents. I think up to like 20 or so. And yeah, like I said, I'm going to put the list of these documents, and I tried as much as I could to make sure everything was complete even before sending out the application. Of course, in some situations, you could always send out the application when you haven't fulfilled all the required documents. But I think that is actually what causes people to get, delay in the process, because usually it takes about 2 years, in most of the cities, right? So in my case, like I mentioned on the caption, it took me 3 months actually. So once I have all the documents put together, I sent the application. And the thing I actually did was that I didn't just apply for the passport, I mean the citizenship. I also applied at the same time for the PR. So I did two applications because it was literally the same documents I needed for both of them as at the time. And maybe something to also call out here. So as at the time I applied, I was already 6 years in the country. For the new law which they passed in June that allows people to get the or apply for the citizenship for 5 years. Previously, it would be 8 years that you've probably lived in the country. For typical students, for typical people who came in as a student, right, you probably lived and worked, in a period of 8 years. So you would have lived in the country for 8 years and at least worked for 2 years within the 8 years, and with a B1 certificate. But then, as at the time I also did mine, they had this situation whereby if you had B2 German certificates and you could already apply under 6 years, right? So it was more like a priority as opposed to people who had B1. So that was my case. I had the B2, and I also was working and I did my master's here. And so I could already apply under the 6 years rule. However, it's the 6 years, 8 years rule doesn't apply anymore. Now it's now 5 years and even B1. So there's still a little bit of conversation about this if they want to change it back to the regular, or I don't know. But in my case, I did it under the 6 years time period, and of course with the B2. And for those people who always want to know if the 6 years or if the period you studied also counts towards this years, the answer is yes, at least in my case. So if you maybe did your program, you came to the country as a student and you studied for like 3 years and then or 4 years and then you worked for just 2 years, all those years would be counted together. So in my case, it was counted. The period I used for my studies was included with the period I was working. So I didn't needed to, finish my studies and then start afresh. You know what I mean? Like it didn't have to count. They didn't have to count it afresh, right? So this is one thing. And also, like I mentioned, I didn't have the PRO before I even applied for the citizenship thing because as at the time I had already been qualified for both. So I just sent out the application for both. And what happened was, I remember when I sent out the application for the PRO and the passport thing. So I think a couple of weeks after, I got a confirmation that I could already come for the biometrics for the PRO, right? So I was like, really cool. This is really a good news. And but at the same time, I was like a little bit hoping that the confirmation for the passport would come because that was the one I was really going for. And because I knew that if I had the PRO, maybe it would just give also the people processing my passport the mind or the feeling that okay, this guy already has a permanent residence. Maybe there are people who needs this passport even more um, urgently than this guy because to me I just don't see like so much of a difference between the PR and actually a passport except that you're actually a citizen and of course you can do some things like you can actually vote and the likes, but other than that it's like you both have like someone who has like the passport and someone who has like the PR. It's like basically you guys have similar positions, right? You can live in the country indefinitely and you can travel to okay, I think there's a couple of difference anyways. So while I was waiting for the confirmation that my passport application has been successful, it was a really tough period for me, right? Because I was reading through a lot of blogs, like a lot of threads on Facebook, and I would see how people have been waiting for like 2 years, some people 3 years, some people had to call lawyers into the case and all that. And I didn't want it to go through that route because I felt like, okay, you know what, I've actually done everything right by the books. Of course, people also do it right by the books and still have to wait. And I don't think I have that patience to be on some waiting list for like 2 years and 2 years plus. I just wanted to get that out of my bucket list. I think on the third month, I wrote them a follow up email, a very detailed follow up email. So if you're also interested in this template, just comment template on the comment section and I'm going to send it over to you. So on this email, I just wrote it. It was quite a very detailed, nice email, which I feel like anyone who was reading it would actually understand my position. And then so I sent this email with extra attached documents and I think after sending that email it was like 4 days after, on the third month, so I got like a confirmation that hey, your application for your citizenship has been successfully processed and you can come over for the certificate. So basically there's this certificate they give you, which you go to the office, you take the normal it's like a ceremony, right, where you swear the oath and then they hand over you this Einbürgerung certificate, which you would then use to apply for the physical passport. And honestly, that was like one of the best days in me living in this country. So I was really happy and called a couple of friends, we celebrated, and then picked up the certificate and straight up the same day I went to the office where I needed to apply for the passport and I applied for it. I also did the express passport, which cost me about 32 euros or so, I can't even remember. And then in 4 or 5 days I got the passport delivered to me in my address. And that was it. One thing I would just say is like, if you are planning to apply for the citizenship or you're already in the process, I would really say patience. It's the key. I know this is really hard when you're already in this process. Sometimes it's like it feels like you've been waiting forever, but trust me, as long as you have everything properly sent out, one day you're definitely going to get the positive answer which you actually deserve. And if you're the type that hasn't applied for it and you aspire to apply for this someday, even though you're already like a student or you're working, my advice for you would be already start putting up the required documents that you would need for this application, because that is one mistake that some of us we make. We think we would just get these documents when it's time. Sometimes it's really hard to get some of this document. For example, the citizenship test, I understand that in some cities it takes like months for you to get an appointment before you could even take or sit for this exam. So that is something, and that is something that is also holding a lot of people back. So if you're already thinking you want to do this, maybe next year, you feel like by next year you would have fulfilled the 2 years working um, contribution timeline thing, you could already start taking these other tests and just putting them together. Another one would be even the German language, which is now the minimum is B1. So you could already start working on the B1, and yeah, just put these things together, and sure you're going to get the results you deserve. And overall, I think it's also a good thing to have. I think now I have like literally access to over, I think now I have access to about 189 countries with visa free or probably visa on arrival. And of course, if you have the passports, you also have the rights to vote in the election in the country, which is also really crucial. And it also gives you this sense of belonging, I would say, to a very large extent. I mean, if you're living in a country for a very long time and you eventually you get the passport, it gives you like this really good sense of belonging. And lastly, of course, you're no longer, under this whole issue of having or needing to go to the immigration office to renew your resident permit and show them some lots proof of whatever documents and all that. And overall, it's just worth it actually. So one last question that I also get asked often is if I did have to forfeit my previous citizenship, which is the Nigerian one. Fortunately enough for me, no, I don't have to forfeit, or I didn't have to forfeit that one. I still have both of my passports. I still have the Nigerian passport and now, of course, the German passports alongside. And I think that is now the general situation as it is for even most of the countries. So, like I said, last year, sometime in June, there was a new law that allows people to have now the German citizenship as well as other citizenship. And also now everybody can apply under the 5 years with the B1, and in some exceptional cases you could even apply under the 3 years if you have a very high qualification like a C1 German language skills, and you've contributed exceptionally to the society, and you have a very good job, and all those things. And yeah, I just want to make this video short and drop it here. So but if you have any questions, or please put it on the comment section, and please don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. Until then, see you on the next video. Ciao.